nonprofits. Before we get started with a few remarks, I wanted to encourage you, feel free if you have any comments or remarks, feel free to put them in the chat. We are certainly looking forward to an engaging session just like we had last week. Before we begin, I wanted to turn it over to the center's president and CEO, Jean Tedrow, to offer a few opening remarks. Jean?
Mute. Am I unmuted now? Okay, sorry about that. Well, first of all, I wanted to say thank you and welcome back to all of you who have joined us for the second of our series, and welcome to all of those who may be just joining today for the first time. I especially want to thank Salima and her team, Rebecca and Katrina, especially for putting all of this program together, and for Dr. Palmer for her leadership. Let me just restate a little bit of what I said last week. Nonprofits are an essential partner with our North Carolina communities. When nonprofit organizations have a strong foundation and manage themselves well, they can focus more wholly on the services and support they bring to our communities. This is why the North Carolina Center for Nonprofits is launching this Nonprofit Management Institute. It's a virtual learning cohort of nonprofit executives, managers, and board leaders, all of you, to assess your organization's management practices, identify successes and challenges, build your capacity where there are gaps, and work toward long-term sustainability. We appreciate the opportunity to bring this program to you. We especially thank the Triangle Community Foundation Collaborative Funding Group to help making this possible. And we're just pleased to be here again with you. Thank you, Salima.
Thank you so much, Jean. I just wanted to take a moment to introduce you all to one of our collaborators and partners that made this institute a success and happening. So I wanted to turn it over to Tanaya Lynch to share some remarks from the Triangle Community Foundation. Tanaya, would you mind unmuting yourself and joining the conversation?
Good morning, everybody. I am Tanaya Sedriff Lynch, and as Salima said, I'm a program officer with the Triangle Community Foundation, but I'm also a member of the funder collaborative, the Triangle Capacity Building Network. And basically our overarching goal is to create a strong nonprofit sector here in the Triangle. And we understand the importance for nonprofits to have a strong infrastructure. And like many other funders, we've recognized the opportunity to help nonprofits build their internal capacity. So we were thrilled to partner with the center and the capacity building programs that they offer, including the Institute, because they align with and support the goals that we're moving towards, which is building strong, sustainable nonprofits. So we're really excited that you all have chosen to participate in this very first cohort of the Institute, and equally excited about what we can learn from each other through this program. So thank you all for participating and being willing to be a part of this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Tanaya, and we appreciate your ongoing partnership and support. I wanted to acknowledge a couple of remarks that were in the chat. So there seems to be a little bit of challenge with accessing some of the handouts. My colleague Rebecca put the link to that once again in the chat, so please feel free to access that. It was also sent on Friday afternoon for your review and reference. Yesterday, we sent out your self-evaluations as attachments as a PDF, which was just essentially the items that you and your team decided that you'd like to work on within the next year within the 6 program practice areas that you'd like to address within the next year. So that was sent as an attachment. The other email that was sent to the collective, everyone received the same email, was the access to the link to the folders. And the reason why you received a secondary email is so that your self-assessment results were uniquely shared with you and not the entire group. So that's why it was sent as an attachment. So if you're having difficulty with that, accessing those files, please feel free to chat either myself or Rebecca. Will make sure we get you connected to all the resources that you need to start for today. Again, wanted to turn it over to our facilitator, Dr. Pamela Palmer, and also her colleague and our colleague, Leslie Morales, who's going to help with navigating today's collaboration. And before we begin, wanted to once again acknowledge the partnerships and sponsors that we have through the Triangle Community Foundation, as well as the Guilford Nonprofit Consortium that was able to afford participants from their network to be involved in this collaborative as well. So with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Pamela Palmer, and please feel free to send, if you're having specific challenges with navigating, please feel free to send Rebecca and I an individual chat. We'll be happy to work with you on a one-on-one basis. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to the Nonprofit Management Institute. So good to see everyone. Last week when we did introductions, we did them by having you to use the annotate feature on the as a part of the Zoom platform. Today we would like to do those introductions just a little bit different. And so we're going to have you go into breakouts. And Rebecca, I believe, is going to help to kind of send you to your breakout rooms. And what we would like for you to do in your breakout space is to introduce yourselves to each other, share what county you are in, and also share something that's unique to your county, or something that your county or community is known for. So Rebecca?
Yep, we're all set. How many minutes would you like to give Dr. Palmer?
About 5.
Okay, perfect.
Yep.
All right, we'll see you back here in 5. Okay, we've got breakout rooms coming back to the group at large.
Great, thank you.
Yep, and we're recording again, so we can hop right back in.
Does anyone want to share any unique tidbits about your county? I thought that was a pretty cool activity just to learn a little bit more about the communities from all across the state. Anyone want to report out? Feel free to unmute or put it in the chat. Anything that's unique to your particular county that you shared?
If you'd like to unmute, you can. If you're having trouble, just raise your hand and I can unmute you. Oh, we got some coming in the chat here. Learned that Mecklenburg County is no longer the most populated county in North Carolina. From Shauna. Oh, Shanna, I think.
Shauna like Donna.
Shauna like Donna, that's right. Not particular to my county, but it's fascinating how many counties are in the state of North Carolina. Does anybody know the number?
100.
There you go. Janetta said Forsyth is known for Dixie Classic Fair. Sarah St. Marie, Transylvania County, great hiking, biking, and lots of breweries. Oh, we got a shout out for the Eno River, the beautiful Eno River.
Guilford County.
Yeah, and one of Kennan's group members made him want to visit Saxbaha. So much to do there. There it is, Shauna like Donna. Oh, Transylvania County has waterfalls from Sarah St. Marie. Taught them that. Great. Greensboro is an LGBTQ and friendly place to live. That's wonderful. Excellent.
Okay.
Very good.
Awesome. So thank you, everybody, for chiming in. What a great state we live in, North Carolina. So I guess it's now my turn to reintroduce myself to the class or to the group. The question is, does anyone know where I was born? What county? What county do you think I was born in? And you can put that in the chat. You know, some say that you can determine what county you might be from in North Carolina based on the way you talk. That I've heard people say that before. So, and the most that you're able to interact with me is through my voice and a little bitty window of my my face. So let's see how it fares. Okay, so let's see, what do we have in the chat? Where was I born? What county? I'm looking, make sure I can. I see Guilford, I see Davidson. I need a hint. Wake, Wayne, Johnston. So the county I was born in is known for blueberries. Someone asked for a hint. I don't see it yet. I see Pitt, nope, not Pitt. I see maybe Duplin. No, not Duplin. Pender, whoa, you're getting close. Onslow, that is it. So I was born in Onslow County. I'm from a little town called Maple Hill, North Carolina. And there are lots of blueberry fields in Onslow County and in Maple Hill specifically. And so I see some folks are from Onslow. So it's good again to be with you this morning. And I bring you greetings from Guilford County because that's where I am physically right now. But definitely love visiting Onslow County. If I could go to the agenda, thank you all for participating in that. And hopefully you learned something about a county that you didn't know. And hopefully you also got to meet some people in the breakouts that you didn't know as well. So here we go. We're off to our content today. We're going to start off by looking at the capacity assessment results and findings. And so you will see, well, I see some more comments in the chat and I don't want to overlook those. Rebecca, can you help me out with some of those?
Yep, I'm responding to folks that are maybe having trouble accessing handouts.
Oh,
I'm so sorry.
okay.
The link,
All right.
but I'm sending those to you. If you have any trouble accessing them, just message me privately in the chat and I'll go ahead and make sure you get that link.
Okay. All right. Okay. Let's see. I don't want to overlook. Are accents across North Carolina really that different? Any comment on that? And you can raise your hand and we can unmute you. Let's go to the gallery view real quick. There we go. Anybody want to comment? Are accents across North Carolina really that different?
I think so.
Yep,
I have a thick accent because I am Hispanic, but when I came from New York, and not just because I speak a different language, but I was very lost. I was like used to the New Yorkers. And when I came, I was like, oh my God, I don't know what they're saying. And I feel maybe because I didn't know Spanish, I mean English, and I was like, oh my God, I'm very lost. I stopped at a gas station and I didn't understand anything of the guy. I was very lost.
Yeah, so North Carolina State, their linguistics department has done a lot of studies on regional accents. They actually go so far to say that in many respects, it's more than just accents. It's full on dialects across the state because the regional differences are more than just sound sometimes. It's also vocabulary and how people use their words and sentence structure. I sent a couple links out in the chat. I couldn't find the really good links I was thinking of though, but if you Google some around NC State and their linguistics department, you'll find it.
Yeah, and especially there's a professor named Walt Wolfram who's known probably internationally for his work on dialects. It's really fascinating. Sounds like Matt and I may have had some similar history with NC State.
Yeah.
Any other comments? I didn't want to miss any of your comments in the chat. So, we're already learning from each other, and that's what this is all about. We all have something to offer in this learning community, and I just love learning from you, and definitely the center, you know, is here for us to learn all about nonprofit management. But there's so many things about who we are and where we're from and the counties we represent and the state of North Carolina, and definitely in terms of what each of your nonprofit organizations' mission and vision is. And so we're going to try to continue to engage ourselves in ways that we can learn more about the state that we all are residing in at the present time. So thank you for sharing, and we'll continue to do that. Okay, if we could go back to the agenda, thank you. And so we're going to start off with looking at your individual capacity assessment that Salima communicated that was sent out to each of you. It is primarily what you noted in the assessment that we did last week. And then we're also going to talk about the summary of those results, meaning the whole class as a whole. And we're going to quickly look at board governance and program design, management, and evaluation on the front end, in terms of what was identified as being some key pieces or key practices that some of you indicated that you wanted to work on. And so we went through and we selected the top 3. So there's going to be a link that's going to come through the chat, which is one report with all 5 principles with the top 3 practices that were noted in the survey that will be in the we'll go over that too, just so you can see what we're looking at to try to really focus on those elements of the training that you're interested in the most. So we'll do board governance first, and we'll look at duties and expectations of board members, the financial management and fundraising responsibilities of a board, accountability and evaluation, and some ways to maybe do that, composition of a board, bylaws and legal compliance. And then the second half of our time, we'll focus on program design, management, and evaluation. And just as a FYI, when I facilitate this part or this particular principle, it will be one big activity. So, and that's important to kind of note, so that you don't, if you take a break, you might want to wait until after we completely finish that activity. And then if you have to take a moment away from the Zoom platform, then you can do so at that time. But I just want to point that out. And then of course you will get some feedback as far as what will be happening next week. So we're going to start off with your individual assessment. And so our individual assessment is all of the responses together. So if we could go to the document that is the capacity assessment summary. So this is all of the results together. So this would be,
Leslie, can you pull that up in the handouts folder?
and while they're pulling that up for us, if you would just go to your individual assessment, and what you should have is you should have you should have for each principal, you should have what you marked as what you wanted to work on under build, thrive, and sustain. So I don't want to go too quickly past this, because I want you to spend a little bit of time with what you marked and what you noted. Is this and help us to know either in the chat, or if you don't have yours, or if there's something you don't understand about it, or I just want you to kind of have that ready.
I also want to make a couple of quick announcements. There are some individuals that are joining us for the first time this week, and welcome for joining us. If you have not completed the assessment, we can send it to you via chat. Also, if you did not receive your assessment, please feel free to private message me, but I would also recommend please check your spam or junk folders. Sometimes our messages have a tendency to go there first. So for those of you who have reached out to me, I will work to make sure that I send that to you, as well as those who have not completed the assessment. We will add that into the chat, okay?
Thank you, Selima. So again, on an individual basis, you have your results back, and what you should have under each of the frames, build, thrive, and sustain, is that you should have what you noted that you want to work on. That's the first thing I want to point out. So this is really your personal, really kind of go-to or point of reference to just kind of help remind you of what you noted on day one, as what you want to focus on as we move through all of the different principles, and we move through and work through all of the training sessions. So that's kind of step one of this process. So and I just want to show you just real quickly what this looks like on our end. You also received this particular document as well. So Leslie, if you could just scroll up just to the bottom of this. So this is board governance. This is the principle number 5. That's what that Q5 means. And here are, right here, go back, right here. So here are the results for board governance under build. And I'm just gonna use this particular report just to show you what it looks like on our end. So on our end, we're looking at that 63.46. So the majority of us indicated that this was something that we want to work on within the next year. So that's the number one. The number 2, as you can see, is the 42.31. And we said that we want to provide board members a clear job description, orientation, and ongoing training. And then the other is number 3. Well, that was number 3. Number 2 was ensure that board of directors is comprised of individuals responsible for representing the best interests of the organization and its mission. So for each of these, we identified kind of what the top 3 are based on the frame. So Leslie, now I'm gonna have you go to the results and findings report. And this you will have not received until today, and that should be coming through the link in the chat. So I'm gonna pause right there until we know that you're able to access that document. I just wanna help us to know how to use the information that we've provided for you. And team, I'm just gonna give everybody a chance to locate and to be able to access results and findings. And if you can't, please let us know in the chat before I move on. It would just, okay, so this is, yes, this is the results and findings of and then once you have that, perfect. Thank you, Leslie. Perfect. So here is board governance again. If you could move that up just a little bit so we can see the bottom. Yeah. So here we are. So this is board governance. And so you can see that the number one item that we all marked under build, and I won't read these to you because you do have it in your document there in your hand. And there's a comment, this document should have come through the chat in a link. You would have just received this today. And I'll pause right there to make sure. Yes. I want to make sure everyone has it before I go on, or that you can access it.
Yep, Leslie popped that file there in the chat. Thanks, Leslie. Leslie is juggling quite a few things right now, so thanks for bearing with us. This document there is, let us know, raise your hand, or let us know if you're not able to open that document at all. Thanks, Leslie.
Okay. Does it look pretty clear, Rebecca, that everybody has it? Do you see anything in the, I don't see anything in the chat. I just don't want to go too quickly.
It looks like we don't have anyone with any issues, so we'll proceed.
Okay,
and
great.
I'll field any issues that come in.
Okay, great. Thank you. So here is for each of the principles that we will cover across the next few weeks or over the next couple of weeks, we will look to this document to help guide what we put emphasis on in the sessions. And so under build, you see that for governance, you can see what the top 3 items were. If you have your own individual report, then you can compare what you marked to what is the top 3 for the whole class. And then of course for Thrive, you can see what the top items were in terms of raising money, financial, in terms of board members volunteering to put in their time. Under Thrive, you can also see what the top, what the number 2 item was under Thrive, and the number 3 item under Thrive. So you can just kind of see where the class is. Leslie, I'm going to have you go to Program Design, Management, and Evaluation, which is the next page. And again, everyone received this in the chat, the link to this document. So here is what our emphasis was in terms of the top 3 items as it relates to our second topic of the day. And so you can see what the emphasis was here. And again, you do have this document, and so you can compare where you see the items that you mark that you want to work on compared to what the entire class is wanting to focus on, or at least wanting to work on in the next year. So if we could go to the gallery view. And I want us to just spend just a couple minutes with this information, because this is the springboard to, again, what we emphasize moving forward. Are there any general comments or questions about assessment, about capacity assessment. You can use the chat, or you can raise your hand and we will unmute you. Comments? Thoughts?
Hi, Shauna like Donna. So I have learned that there's no such thing as a silly question. And I'm very new to the nonprofit world. So I would love for anyone, for myself and anyone who is like me, or for people who have been in it to win it. Can we just like start out with remembering and identifying and naming capacity? Can we start there? Because it might mean different things to different people, and I don't want to assume anything. Thanks.
Yes. So when we talk about capacity as it relates to nonprofits, we're talking about the capacity of the nonprofit across management functions in our framework. And so we're looking at capacity initially related to 12 principles of management. And so we're trying to determine where we are and our ability to move to a sustainable state or condition as a nonprofit. And so capacity is all about the ability and how able, agility. I typically don't define it. I typically describe it because it really is more of a descriptive way of thinking about an organization, in this case, a nonprofit organization. When we talk about capacity building, typically we see capacity building happening in about 3 different ways. Capacity building happens in training. So right now we're engaged in capacity building because we're receiving training. Capacity building is also technical assistance. So it may be that you have to bring on some type of professional service or some other type of resource to help you to enhance your capacity in one of the principal areas. And then another way of building capacity is related to consultation or coaching. Oftentimes, individuals who are executive directors of nonprofits, they might secure a coach to help them build their individual capacity. So capacity in a nonprofit space, it could be individual capacity building or it could be organizational capacity building. And I think I see some questions here. Let's see. Or comments. I'm gonna ask some members of the team to share in the chat. Yep.
So the question from Catherine, do you recommend tackling build items first? Have you responded to that one yet?
Not necessarily. It just depends on your ability to address a particular practice. It could be that there's a practice under the sustain area that you may very well be able to tackle, not in all cases, but you may be able to address that or to enhance your capacity prior to build. The way the framework is set up is for us to conceptualize how we might grow and develop our nonprofit's capacity from this kind of build, thrive, sustain framework. Does that help?
That's great, Dr. Palmer.
Okay.
From Kenan, the assessment provides a lot of insight. How do you recommend communicating these findings?
What I would do is very similar to if you're talking about the results and findings of the class, or let me ask that, are you talking about the results and findings of the class, or are you talking about your own individual notations that you made?
Sorry, it's the individual there for the organization.
Yes. So one of the ways that you could do this, I've recommended this over the years, but that's because I am an advocate for building capacity. I think it's just as important to have as a part of your staff meetings and also as a part of your board meetings, some communication out as to where your nonprofit is in terms of building its capacity. You know, it could be that, Ken, you have this assessment now you have taken the time to identify for yourself what you think that is important for you to work on in this training experience. You could do the same with your peers. I'm not sure what your role is within your nonprofit organization, but you could use kind of a 360 type of way of doing this and have individuals note what they think the nonprofit needs to work on as a whole. You could do it with the board, you could do it with the department, you could do it with the entire staff, and then you can compile your information just like we did. And we use SurveyMonkey to do that. Does that help? Okay, great.
And a thumbs up there. Thanks, Kenan. And then just a comment, capacity equals what you can do with what you got.
There you go. Over the years, I've done research on some of the researchers that have studied capacity and capacity building. There's probably not more than a half a dozen what I would call true definitions of capacity. But typically the way that I described it is kind of how it's couched, you know, in terms of thinking about it. I think about capacity and capacity building as growth and development and the ability and or the agility to be able to do so by that nonprofit.
That's great. I think that sums up all the questions and comments in the chat.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Rebecca. So we're going to move into our board governance topic for today. So we're going to transition, and let me just say to us, you know, this is a workshop. And so, you know, get all your tools ready. Highlighters, pens, pencils. You're going to be retrieving information in the chat. There's going to be today and moving forward. There is some information that I do hold on to, and I share it in the experience. So you'll get some handouts and you'll get information as you have prior to. But there will be, on occasion, there'll be maybe 2 or 3 pieces of information that if you're not in the workshop experience, you may not necessarily receive that, because we're going to share that at a particular moment in the sequence of the training that I kind of instruct our team to do so. So I want to kind of say that up front, because I want to make sure, and we want to make sure you get all of your materials and information in advance that you need. But there are some pieces of information that are going to be unique to the moment. And so that information we'll be sharing as we work together. And again, you know, you might want to just kind of have all of your learning tools ready. The other thing I want to say as well is that we will be using some of the Zoom functions that are a part of the platform for facilitation in a virtual manner. So there will be some elements of what we do that might be new to you, and it might take a little bit for us to get adjusted, but we'll wait on everybody. So I'll try my best to do that. Okay, so our board governance is our first topic. In comparison, the board governance information that I'm going to share today is going to be a little bit of hands-on. It's going to be pointing out pieces of information in your handouts as compared to the program design management eval. That's going to be primarily hands-on. So just so you kind of know how we're going to be facilitating the sessions. So the first thing I want you to do is I want you to grab a piece of paper. And it is, I'm monitoring our time here because I want to make sure that we get a break in before we go into the next topic. So if you have a piece of paper, if you have your paper already, what I want you to do is I want you to write for me how you would define a board of directors. How would you define a board of directors? And how would you define a board member? So on that piece of paper, you define a board of directors, and how would you define a board member? And for some of you who don't mind, if you would put your definition in the chat once you have it. How would you define a board member, and how would you define a board of directors? Anybody want to share? Either in the chat or just let us know if you want to speak. I see for a board, a group responsible for oversight of a nonprofit, ensuring it adheres to, where did it go?
Ensuring it adheres to its mission.
Okay.
And from Shauna, like Donna, Board of Directors, a body of advisors who understand, are committed to upholding and furthering the mission of an organization.
Okay.
They're coming in quick now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Corey mentions
Okay.
that a board member is an individual who believes in and actively supports achievement of nonprofit mission. Jen mentioned that a board of directors is a group dedicated to the development, oversight, and direction of an organization. Karen mentioned board member understands the mission, work of the organization, passionate about the mission, able to bring resources to the organization. It's PFC Community Engagement. I'm not sure of your name, so my apologies. The board of director is representative or your community in the population you serve. So okay. Kelly mentioned a board member is a dedicated volunteer who assumes duty of care, participates in visioning, and takes on the role of advocate. That's good. Val mentioned a body of individuals with expertise, resources, and commitment that aligns with the mission of the organization and that helps to direct the sound operation of the organization. These are really great definitions. A body of people that help steer a nonprofit offering ethical and fiduciary guidance. Thank you, Sharon, for clarifying your name. I'll be happy to update that for you as well. So then also, Effie mentioned each board member has a various area of expertise that supports the mission of the organization. Susan mentions that a board provides governance for the organization through policies that guides the ED on a day-to-day management, and direction of the organization. Marisa mentions that the board of directors, they're a group of people that oversees an organization. They are responsible for the vision and mission of the org. Jamie mentioned that the board of directors is a group of individuals with various backgrounds who lend their expertise to oversee how an organization runs. Michael mentioned a board should facilitate the successful financial and fiduciary responsibilities and stability of the organization and provide guidance and partnership to the ED and the staff as needed and necessary. Marquita mentions that a body of individuals that guides and supports the business and the operations of the nonprofit. This group also has a fiduciary responsibility. And then the last response I see here, the board of directors provides leadership in the strategic management of the nonprofit, supervises ED, determines policies, compliance, and fiduciary responsibilities. Thank you all for submitting those definitions. Really great.
Thank you, Salima. And so if you go in your handout information, the very first handout you have is board of directors and board member. And there is a description or definition there. I lean more towards descriptions as opposed to definitions, because one thing you want to make a note of is that for a nonprofit, in the bylaws of that nonprofit, typically it outlines the persona of that particular board of directors for that nonprofit. And the bylaws also outline exactly how the board is supposed to function. So when describing a board of directors from nonprofit to nonprofit, there are going to be some elements that are going to be different. However, we know that there are some specific duties that have been passed down as being kind of the staple duties of what a board member is responsible for and what a board of directors is responsible for. Some of you may be familiar with this: duty of loyalty, duty of care, and duty of obedience. That is your next handout in your packet. And so these are considered to be the go-to. Years ago, there was a case whereby these particular duties became well known. And so most boards of directors, most nonprofits, I don't say all, typically have board of directors liability insurance. So if there's something that should happen, or there's something that a board member does, and it causes some legal activity, if you will, then these are the duties that typically we look to see if there was some violation. Was there a violation of duty of care? Was there a violation of duty of loyalty? And was there any violation of duty of obedience? And so these are kind of the go-to duties that most any board development training that your board members might participate in, they're going to learn about these. Are there questions about duty of care, duty of loyalty, duty of obedience? I don't see any in the chat. I don't see any hands raised. So let me ask this question. How many of you have never served on a board of directors of a nonprofit? Have never served on a board? Can you put that in the chat just so I can kind of, if you have never served on a board of directors, just put no, and then I can kind of see how many. Never served on a board. Okay. So as we move along, this is important for me to know so that I can better kind of explain some elements of what it is that we are talking about. It looks like there are 15 out of who is in the class currently that have never served on a board. So, that said, it is board development is a capacity area, obviously, and it is also a management area. And typically, the board development is encouraged or influenced by the executive director if you have an executive director in place, because the executive director is working directly with the board. So that was just a piece of information I needed to know going forward. Of those 15 who have never served on a board, do you know anyone that has served on a board? of a nonprofit. So out of those 15, do you know anyone who has served on a board? Okay, thank you. So that's good. That's good to know, because the next thing I want you to do is I want you to write a quote for me, right? So typically people serve on boards because they have an interest in the mission and the vision of the nonprofit that they are volunteering their time with. And so what I want you to do is, if you have served on a board before, I would like for you, on that same piece of paper, I would like for you to write a quote for me, 10 words or less, 10 words or less. Why did or do you serve on a board? Why did or do you serve on a board? And for those individuals who have never served on a board, that person that you noted that you know that serves on a board, why do you think they serve on a board? Or what would be their quote as to why they serve on a board? So 10 words or less. I probably should say 3 to 10 words. So not less than 3 words, not more than 10. I see there's a comment in the chat about duty of loyalty. Yeah, duty of loyalty, care, and obedience is one that your board should know. I see that I see Shauna, I see Corey, and I see yeah, as it relates to the care, loyalty, and obedience. So if you could pop your quote into the chat real quick for me. I think we can all see those. So my point here is that whenever we are trying to help board members understand what their duties and expectations are, that's the topic we're on right now, it is important for us to hone in on, why did this individual decide that they were going to serve on your board? Because remember, we're talking about nonprofit management functions. And so this is important to know exactly what is the motivating factor around why people are serving on your board, so that you can help to keep that in the forefront, you know, as you're working with them, as you're trying to get them engaged, as you're asking them to serve in other ways other than just holding that seat of being on the board. So that's important for us to know and understand. It's also just as important for board members to know how a nonprofit kind of works or how it's structured. So if I could go to the PowerPoint presentation, and if we could go to the next slide, right here. So these are some elements of, and I do need you to grab another piece of paper. I I just pulled out these key stakeholders as it relates to how a nonprofit organization is structured. And so I have here board of directors, executive director, volunteers, staff, and 4 board committees. 4 board committees. And what I want you to illustrate for me on your paper is I want you to draw what the org chart for a nonprofit would look like or should look like, with these 3 areas being in the org chart. So how would you draw this chart? How would you do that? Can we go back to the gallery view? Okay. So can anybody just hold up your picture? Can you do that for me? Can you show me what you, I think I can see. Okay, I see. Can you see what everybody came up with? Can you see? Okay, I see Corey's. I see Jen's. Okay. Marquita, I can't see yours. Okay, I can see it now. I see the blue Post-it, that's Lisa. Let's see, anybody else? I see Katina, thank you. Jamie, thank you. DW, I see yours. Okay, all right. So one of the things that we wanted to highlight is you know, this kind of visual picture or org chart of how a nonprofit might be set up in terms of these areas. We could have added more areas. I just wanted us to begin to think about this whole idea of the nonprofit having an org chart. If you could use the thumbs up, if this is the case for you in the reaction, how many of your nonprofits have an org chart? If I can see, can you do I can see some thumbs up. Okay, I see Jackie, I see, okay, all right. This is an item that would be very helpful to your board members. You know, if you want them to know how to insert themselves in the day-to-day work that you're doing, it would be significant to have an org chart that you could just say, here is our nonprofit, these are all the different stakeholders, and this is how everybody fits into the work that we do. That is very important. Leslie, can I get you to show my org chart based on those items that our group just showed? So I'm going to show you what the board of directors, executive director, the 4 board committees, the staff, and the volunteers. I'm going to show you what that looks like on my end. Again, this is helpful. So this is, if you look at those that I shared with you, those stakeholder groups, the board of directors of a nonprofit is at the top of the org chart. And then the board of directors has committees, and some boards have more than 4. Of course, this is just in terms of for training purposes. And then there's the executive director, and then there's the nonprofit staff, and then there are volunteers. And notice I have my lines drawn from the volunteers, from the executive director directly to the volunteers. And then I also have it executive director to staff to volunteers, because some volunteers work directly with the ED or the president or the CEO, and then some volunteers are working specifically with staff. So an org chart is important, and when we're wanting board members to know what their duties and responsibilities are, yes, duty of care, duty of loyalty, duty of obedience, but we also want them to know how your individual nonprofit is structured and how the work happens on a day-to-day basis. Many of our board members are not with us on a day-to-day basis, and so it's important for them to know how how the organization is set up, but also if there are any changes. So that's important for us to know. If we could go back to the gallery view. Any initial just comments or thoughts about the org chart? You can either put it in the chat or you can kind of let us know that you want to talk. And yes, we can share the chart. I see a question in the chat about would this org chart be different for small organizations? Not necessarily. I run a nonprofit that is like a quarter-time nonprofit, right? And we have a minimum of 3 board members. The work still has to be done and can be done by way of committee. Committees don't just necessarily have to be board members. It's important for a committee to be chaired by a board member, but we could most definitely, a committee could have people that are not necessarily on the board as a part of the committee. For a small nonprofit, you still may have staff. So this chart per se, or visual, is not just unique to a smaller organization. Let's see. Can I get some help with the chat comments?
Yes, I'm here to help.
Okay.
So what are some examples of committees that a board would have set up?
Some examples of board committees?
Yep, I think it means types of committees.
Oh yeah, so you could have fundraising, you could have human resources, you could have a program committee, you could have, committees can be set up specifically to the needs of that nonprofit and also as it relates to the mission and vision.
Mm-hmm. Also for events like a host committee, I know that's a real popular one.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's great.
And you can also have ad hoc committees. I mean, you may just have a committee that's set up, to Rebecca's point, you may have committees that are set up specifically, you know, for an event or just for something that's going to be on a temporary basis. So you can have permanent committees, but you could also have committees that are set up for a specific purpose, and those would be temporary.
Mm-hmm, for sure. From Susan, I would also make a direct connection between the board of director and committees to staff and the executive director. Mm-hmm.
Yes, yes, yes. Let me talk about the executive committee, and you actually have a handout in your packet titled Executive Committee. It's towards the end, but the executive committee is comprised of the officers of the board. So your president, your vice president, your treasurer, your secretary, whatever those officer roles are of that board, that's your executive committee, just in case someone doesn't know what that is. Mm-hmm. Or who that body of people are. Okay.
This is a comment from Stephen. I don't think it is different, but it is often confusing when board members are most of the organization's volunteers.
Yes, yes. So they're out doing the direct service or helping with the day-to-day stuff, if I could say that. And they're also serving as the board, as a board member. That can be tricky. You know, that can be a little tricky. So yeah, to your point, I agree. Is there?
There's a comment from Rose with an agreement from Corey that in smaller organizations like ours and others that she knows of, staff work more directly with board and board committee. Thoughts?
That can definitely be the case as well. There are, I serve on a board currently that I chair, and there's probably 12 committees. And those 12 committees are comprised of individuals that work in on that particular issue. the board chairs interact directly with the staff of the nonprofit that is doing the administration of this work that we're doing. So that is a common practice too, to have staff and board members working on a committee. But typically the committee is chaired by a board member and staff support that chair.
Question from Adriana. Any thoughts on flat org charts?
Give me a little bit more, Adriana. I'm not sure what you're.
Go ahead.
So, can you hear me? Sorry.
Yes. Yep.
I know that in some organizations and in some business models now, there's kind of been a move to combat inequities where they've gone to flat org charts where everyone is just kind of equal, and they've even gone to flat pay scales. And I've thought that this might be something that is moved towards, but it would be like totally turning everything on its head. I serve on a board, and I'm on an equity committee, and there have been conversations around it, and it's made me go, when we think about how the structure would just be flipped and turned around. And I just didn't know if there's been any conversations, at the center around what that would look like for boards, because we're so structured and we're so top down. And I'm not saying it's good or bad. I just, it would be a total reversal in things. So
I don't know about my colleagues, but I've not heard a whole lot about nonprofits moving in that direction at the present time. As a person who's the executive director of a nonprofit, I would find that very difficult to have that to be the philosophy, of the nonprofit when you have individuals that are being compensated versus the individuals who are not. But my colleagues may have a comment about that might be different than mine, or it may be in alignment with mine.
Yeah, Dr. Palmer, I haven't really heard much research around board members that are being compensated. What I will say is around new leadership trends for nonprofits. The most that I've heard thus far as non-traditional roles is how we have like co-leadership models, making sure that there's shared leadership on the executive level as well as within the board. So as far as trends for that, I haven't heard anything as far as with compensation for board of directors. So that's in alignment.
Okay. All right. In your packet, you have a handout titled Board Responsibilities Checklist. I want you to take a look at that handout and let me know if there's anything on our list that you don't understand. So there is a board responsibilities checklist in your packet. Is there anything listed there? And if there is, you can either put it in the chat or you can let me know. Continue to look at that, but I want to move on to the bylaws. So Leslie, if you could show these are sample bylaws.
Real quick, Dr. Palmer, we had a question about that document. What is the name of the document you just had everyone looking at? Was it the role?
It's the board responsibilities checklist.
Okay.
It's got a list of items with open boxes and like little check boxes in front of it. It should be the third document in the handouts packet.
Okay, thank you.
Board responsibilities checklist.
Great, thank you.
There is a question about strategic planning, and if I could, we do have a topic on strategic planning that's going to come up later in the institute, and so I'll be glad to answer that. I hate to put that off that long, but just for the sake of time, I'm going to have to go to our next area of work around board governance. So I'm going to try to respond to as many of these questions as I can. But if I see where we're going to pick up with that in another space, then I'm going to kind of defer to that, especially the one about board and staff responsibilities in putting the plan together.
That's great. And also the same goes for raising funds and what that looks like in the budget. We do have a section later on that we'll cover, correct? Okay.
So the item about Court of Appeal, I see that question is raised. Depending upon what type of work your nonprofit does, so I chair a board where we have an appeals committee. And the reason we have an appeals committee is because we award dollars to other nonprofits. And so we have an RFP process. And if there is a decision made and that particular nonprofit wants to appeal it, they can. So I hope that answers that question. That was kind of a unique question. I mean, a unique item in our list. And we do have, we're going to get to the assessment of boards as well in just a minute. We do have something for that. Okay. All right. So moving on to the bylaws. So I want to point out some information that's in our bylaws. And these are sample bylaws. There is, so you're gonna, this is not in your packet, but what I would encourage you to do, if you have never read the bylaws of the nonprofit that you represent, I would encourage you to get a copy. Can we do a gallery view right quick? I just want to see, I want to get a sense of, can you just raise your hand or show me or somehow, have you ever read the bylaws of the nonprofit you represent? Just kind of, because if you haven't, I think it would be a good idea for you to do that. The bylaws incorporate, Leslie, you can go back to the bylaws now. The bylaws incorporate, for the most part, how the board of directors functions. And so this is a nonprofit that I helped start, and these are our bylaws. And typically the bylaws have what you may have heard of as articles of incorporation. I'm not going to read this whole document to us. I'm just going to tell you what you can find in this document. So the first thing that you find in this document is the organization and the name of it. And then Article 2 is the purpose of the nonprofit. This is the mission of this nonprofit and the principles for practice of this nonprofit. Then as far as membership, some nonprofits are membership oriented, but some are not. So like sororities, fraternities have members and they pay membership dues, et cetera, but not all nonprofits do. For example, the Guilford County Resource and Referral Center, you know, doesn't have a membership other than the board members as the membership. Meetings in the bylaws, it is noted when the regular meetings occur. So when a nonprofit is created, all of this information is predetermined. It can be amended later if some changes occur, but this is where you will find this kind of information. So regular meetings, Leslie, you can go ahead and go for quorum, whether or not, if you're voting on something, what constitutes a quorum or how voting takes place, the order of business, specifically how long a board member can serve in a term, you know, all of those kinds of things are a part of your bylaws. There's some other areas I want to point out. So here's one. It is the expectation that every board member give an annual financial contribution to display 100% financial support from the board of directors. You may not see this in all bylaws. You may not. But for this particular nonprofit, for our nonprofit, this is one of the items that you'll see. Also, in terms of officers, I mentioned this earlier, president, vice president, secretary, treasurer. These are considered your officer positions, and this is considered your executive committee. A lot of nonprofits operate in this fashion. Leslie, you can keep going. Here's an item that is typical in bylaws. No officer shall, for reason of his office, be entitled to receive any salary or compensation. Board members are typically not compensated. There's a section here on committees and how committees are structured. So for this particular nonprofit, the permanent committees shall be determined based on the needs identified by the board. Some examples, but not limited to, are executive, nominating, personnel, and/or development committees. Again, the bylaws help frame how the board of directors is supposed to function. Leslie, you can go ahead. Okay. Let me pause here. Let's go back to the gallery view. And are there questions about bylaws? Bylaws. Again, this is required for a nonprofit to complete the 1023 nonprofit application to be tax exempt. You have to include bylaws. And I'll repeat, if you have never read the bylaws of the nonprofit you represent, I think it would be a good idea to do that. When you do an orientation for your board members, this is a document that you want to review with them so that they know what their expectations are.
So a quick comment from Stephen. Very important to follow bylaws, otherwise potentially decisions are not valid if they weren't followed. So that's sort of the foundation and the basis for decision making within the board and the organization, right? And then looks like Alana asked, can you share the document of the bylaws in the chat? Leslie, if that's something that you're able to share the link for in there, that would be great. And then a question from Maria. Can an individual serve on multiple boards at a time?
Sure they can. That'd be a lot of work, but yes, they can serve on multiple boards if that's something they desire. A conflict of interest policy is a part of the bylaws. However, for the Guilford County Resource and Referral Center, we have a conflict of interest policy that requires a signature and all of that. And so that's not here in this document, but to file with the state of North Carolina in your articles, you have to attach a conflict of interest policy. So yes, I do think it's in here. I didn't highlight it there, but I do think it's in this document.
A comment from Adriana. In serving on a board, I've noticed they tend to become most important during conflict. If you have someone who can be the bylaw turd, a term borrowed from theater, but someone who keeps their eye on the laws, on the bylaws during meetings, it helps avoid conflict.
You know, yes, but what I would say to that is that it's every board member's individual responsibility to be the bylaw turd, if I'm reading that right. And I say that in a supporting type way. If there were to be any type of legal action taken against, let's just say, a nonprofit, and the board was called in to engage and share their position or their contribution or not to the conflict or to the issue, it would be the individual responsibility of that board member to know. So we don't get a pass if there is a person monitoring, like a parliamentarian would be in other types of organizations. We don't get a pass just because there's a person that we've assigned to keep us abreast of the bylaws. It is every board member's individual responsibility to know what's in the bylaws.
Agreed. Yep. And then another comment from Adriana. We share this per meeting, and assigning the roles helps put everyone on the task. So getting in the habit of sharing the bylaws regularly
Yes.
so that it sort of gets ingrained, it's a good idea.
It's not a bad idea to have the bylaws reviewed either every year and make changes to the bylaws as needed. Bylaws can be amended. Bylaws can be amended.
Yep, we have a comment
Yep.
here from Kenan that he's the governance committee chair for the board that he serves on, and they track compliance to the bylaws and review them annually. And then Wendy thanked you for mentioning that it's each board member's responsibility.
Yes. Yes. Okay, I'm going to move along here. We have in your packet a handout titled Fundraising is Not. Notice in the bylaws for this particular nonprofit, we indicated that you know, board members should give a donation. And so I included is it my handout? Yes, let's see. I included a handout titled Fundraising is Not. So I think that would be something you might want to review, you know, as well, you know, to think about, you know, just kind of how can a board member engage in fundraising? So this is, and Leslie has this here for you so that you can see it. The same holds true in terms of one of the board responsibilities is to understand the finances. And we have a training in this series on financial management. But just for your note taking, if you would, fundraising and financial management go together. We should be looking at our finances in alignment with how we are raising money. And so there are a couple of things around the financial reporting that you want to take into consideration. And if you could just write these down, can we go back to the gallery view? If you could just write these down. We're going to come back to this when we look at financial management. But there are 4 financial documents. Well, I probably should say 5, but typically in a board meeting, you're going to see a profit and loss document. So it's important for you to understand and for your board members to understand what types of financial documentation and reporting your nonprofit uses. Quite a few of our nonprofits use QuickBooks. And QuickBooks will generate various types of reports. But it is important to know. So here are the 4. Statement of financial position, statement of activities, statement of cash flow, and statement of functional expenses. We're going to come back and spend more time on those. But between now and 2 Tuesdays from now, when we talk about financial management, see if you can take a look at these particular financial reports from your nonprofit. Because these are the types of reporting that's shared in a board meeting. One of the things that I tell board members all the time when I do board development training is, just like with the bylaws, it's important for individual board members to know how to read the financial reports. Yes, the staff may have a CFO that gives the report during the board meeting. Yes, the nonprofit may have a financial management committee and the treasurer chairs it and they give a report, but it's each individual board member's responsibility to make sure that they understand that nonprofit's financial reporting. The 4 statements again: statement of financial position, statement of activities, statement of cash flow, and statement of functional expenses. The profit and loss report is different. It's set up differently. It's set up a little bit different. But you can determine to some degree the financial position from the profit and loss document. You know, but it's important for us to, I don't know, some of my colleagues may recommend another software other than QuickBooks. I recommend QuickBooks because it's commonly used across nonprofits. Most of the time when I inquire with a nonprofit of, you know, what software do you use, most of them say QuickBooks. So I don't know if anybody else has an opinion about that, especially if there's a finance person on the in the class. I'm not sure. The nonprofit that I helped start, we've been using QuickBooks for 10 years. So it works for us. And you can also do it online, and you can also do it on your PC. I think there are 2 different ways that you can acquire it. So.
Yes, that's correct. And from time to time, the center will have hosted some QuickBook trainings for either version. So if you're ever looking for that, you can look on our events calendar and find training on that if you're curious or need assistance.
And Marquita, I want to respond to your comment. You gave me a little bit more information after do I recommend QuickBooks? One thing I was thinking, I didn't say it out loud, but now that you've added this to your comment, if an accountant is kind of telling you not to use QuickBooks, it may be because the services you would pay for with the accountant takes place in the QuickBooks software. So I don't know, you might want to, you know, that's just a little comment there because you wouldn't need them to generate reports. If you're inserting your own information, you click a button and you get these reports out of the QuickBooks software. So I don't know. All right. We're going to take a break here in a minute before we go on to our next topic, but I want to point out a couple of more things in your packet. So we've got fundraising is not. We also have in your handouts, board of directors versus executive director responsibilities. I think governance and oversight, we've got that down packed. So I'm not gonna highlight that, but the board of directors versus the executive director responsibilities, or the board chair versus the executive director, Leslie, I'm sorry. Board chair versus executive director. So this is where conflict happens a lot of times when it comes to board of directors and nonprofits. It is important for the board chair to know what their role is. I have encountered situations where the board chair misinterprets their role. And the primary difference is that the executive director manages the day-to-day operations of the nonprofit. That is the primary difference. The board chair supervises and presides over the board members as the officer of that body. And so what we've provided here is we've provided just some differences so that you're able to see what some of those differences are. Nonprofits oftentimes find themselves, or we find ourselves in conflicting situations when the board chair and or the executive director doesn't know where the boundaries are. To be clear, it really primarily aligns with the day-to-day operations as opposed to governance and oversight. Now, I do know, and we are all aware, there are some nonprofits where everybody's a volunteer. And sometimes to this question, can the board chair and ED be the same person? They can, it can work that way as long as it's a voluntary role that person has in both positions. If that individual becomes the paid executive director, they are not to serve as the board chair. Can we go back to gallery view? So that's important to keep in mind. Like I said, I've seen quite a few nonprofits find themselves in conflicting situations when individuals just don't know what their roles are. That is why it's important to do a board orientation. And that is also why it's important for board members to know what's in the bylaws. And in the bylaws, if you remember, there was a description of the board chair or the president of the board and all those different roles. You also have in your handout a handout titled, Leslie, you don't have to go to this one because everybody has it. It's titled, hold on. It's titled Board of Directors Job Descriptions. So what we've provided for you is we've provided in general, the board member, the vice chair, the committee chair, the secretary, and the treasurer, and there's a separate sheet titled board chair. So you have this information there for you to review. How are we doing? Are we doing pretty good? We're rolling up on a break so we can switch to our next topic. The other thing I want to point out that you have in your packet, in your handouts, you have a position review worksheet and you have a board of directors evaluation. So we've provided for you an evaluation, and you can change this. You can modify this. You know, you can create this so that it fits your needs. And that way you can do and have your board do an assessment. They can do individual assessments and they can also do it collectively in that regard. The other thing that the board is responsible for is the board is responsible for evaluating the performance of the executive director. And so we provided a executive director position review worksheet for that as well. Now, let me ask you a question about both of those. Well, let me rephrase that. Do you have any questions about the assessment? Do you have any questions about the review worksheet? You can modify these to meet your needs. I don't know if the team wants to comment about what the center might have available as it relates to, or resources the center might have available as it relates to evaluating the board or evaluating the executive director.
Sure. Thank you for sharing that, Dr. Palmer. For those of you that are members of the Center for Nonprofits, there is a resource that's available called Information Central. It's our online library that's been curated with trusted, relevant resources for both evaluation of the executive director and board of directors. So please feel free to visit that for a wealth of samples that you can utilize. I would also encourage you, if you have a subscription to BoardSource, they have several resources that are available behind their member curtain and also beyond. So feel free to utilize that. That's one of the center's partners as well. We will also make sure that all of the handouts that have been distributed today, that you have access to that, not only through the links, but through our online community via Center Connect. You should have received an invite for that on Friday with the link to the handout and all of that, and you'll receive a reminder once again this week if you missed it. So all of these resources will be at your fingertips via our online community and the information central library that's available for members of the Center for Nonprofits. If you have specific inquiries while a part of this class, you can certainly reach out to me and my team. We'll be happy to share any other resources that we can think of or connect you to the right places where you might want to go to answer any of your questions. So again, thank you for that opportunity, Dr. Palmer, to share that, and please stay in touch.
Okay, so I do believe I have shared all of the handouts that you have in your packet. I think I have incorporated that in our training so far this morning. The last thing, almost last thing that I want to talk about, then we're going to take a break and regroup for our next topic, is I want to talk a little bit about recruiting and retaining board members. And Leslie, if you could show my image of, hold on, I will give you the name of that. If you could show my image of board composition. And when this image comes up, I want you to tell me, now we're talking about boards of directors, we're talking about recruiting and retaining board members. Well, a lot of times our boards have a composition that is crafted at the inception of the nonprofit, meaning who's gonna serve on this board and why. Some of our nonprofits that do government programming, sometimes the board members are, the composition is predetermined. And so it's required that you have certain individuals, maybe with certain professions, maybe with certain talent or skills or influence as to how your board is going to be structured. So when this image comes up, I want you to put in the chat for me, Leslie, go to the capacity building resources, that image.
Okay.
So in terms of the board composition, we look at demographics, we look at characteristics, we look at size and shape. And so when you see this image, I just want you to put in the chat for me what comes to mind as you think about board composition. And the biggest takeaway is that it is at the discretion of the board, it is at the discretion of the nonprofit as to the composition of the board. So when you see this image, put in the chat for me, what do you see in terms of thinking about board composition? Mm-hmm. Yes, some members do more than others, diversity but unequal power, all shapes, all sizes, unequal representation and responsibilities. Boards are not perfect. They are definitely not perfect. A lot of balls in the air, yes. So in thinking about this, definitely there are challenges. I'm just kind of reviewing what we see in the chat, and if all of us would kind of pay attention to what our colleagues are posting in the chat. The one thing that I always say about boards of directors of a nonprofit are directly influenced by the executive director and the president or CEO of that nonprofit. Whether that individual is a volunteer or whether that individual is paid. And so one of the things that's just very important is for there to be leadership around the board of directors. If there is an executive director or president and CEO of that nonprofit, that's a part of their role. That's a part of their job, is to maintain a board of directors that meets the needs of that nonprofit. That's very important. If it's a nonprofit where, let's just say, there isn't a paid executive director or president or CEO, it makes it a lot more difficult in order for that board to function the way that it needs to in terms of what the nonprofit needs. But boards are different. No board is going to be the same. The composition is not going to be the same. But demographics is a part of that thought process. The characteristics of the board, what type of skill set do you need? And then also in terms of how many people have to serve on your board. Your bylaws indicate the minimum number of board members, and in some cases, the maximum number of board members. So again, composition typically is determined at the inception of that nonprofit, and sometimes that has to be modified over time. There are nonprofits whereby the composition is determined based on the purpose for which that nonprofit was set up. So Leslie, you can go back to the gallery. We've already talked about executive committee. The last thing that I want to just mention is that there are elements of running a nonprofit that are determined by the individuals that are managing and leading that nonprofit and or started it. But then there are also obligations that we have to the IRS. You know, as a board, we're supposed to be a part of various practices or tasks that nonprofit has to perform. For example, the IRS requires, and we'll talk about this in financial management, the IRS requires that a nonprofit submit a 990 every year. That is the document that reports the financial activity of that nonprofit for that year. And so that's a part of that in terms of that. It's also important for the nonprofit to have insurance, board of directors insurance, in the event that there is something that occurs by a board member, and maybe they're doing it as a representative of that nonprofit that helps to protect that nonprofit. So the bylaws and legal compliance is another element of what board members need to know. Now, we don't want to scare our board members, right? We don't want to scare them. We don't want to run them off by telling them that, oh, we have insurance and we have, you know. So you want to make sure that when you're explaining the essence of being responsible and accountable, that's really what it's all about. But sometimes board members will get a little nervous, and it's like, now I have to do what? I have to sign a what? A confidentiality, a conflict of interest policy. But yes, all of those things are to help us to be accountable. Let's see. Can you expound on board of directors insurance? It's liability insurance. Your nonprofit probably has liability insurance, especially if they have employees or if they pay people. They already have liabilities insurance, and oftentimes it's a part of the bundle. Does that help? Okay. Wow, we got through a lot of information. Okay, so board governance. Real quick, what's your biggest takeaway? Put it in the chat for me before we take our break. What's your biggest takeaway, board governance? And if I could get some help once those are posted.
Yep, I'm here.
Okay, thank you.
Sure thing. Marquita mentioned that she appreciates the handouts, lots of them, so thank you for sifting through those with us. Keeping the members active, board members, I assume you're talking about, Emma. Board training is a key to reducing conflict, from Melissa. Adriana, the split up of duties between the ED and the board chair, those distinctions are important. Jonetta, the difference of the chair and the ED. And from Matt, boards need a lot of structure and intentional review, check-ins to function properly. Jackie Davis, we've got differences in board chair and ED, another shout out for that. From Marisa, everybody read the bylaws. And Mary, board orientation and development is huge. And Heather, boards have a lot of responsibility. Yes, they do. It's not something to enter into lightly. And then from Val, understanding each board member's personal why and leveraging it appropriately and keeping members engaged and active. Yep, that relationship aspect of board members and why they're committed to your mission and involved with your organization is key. From Jillian, board members need to know their job description and also be aware of bylaws. And Katina, bylaw overview should be part of a new board member orientation, for sure. Indeed. Wendy, looking forward to using the board and ED evaluations. Yay, that's good. From Kenan, governance is a complex concept that requires constant attention. Yes, you can never put it to bed and say, well, we did that, that's over with, thank goodness. Another takeaway from Janetta, bylaws overview is her other takeaway. And Christy, this is a good one, the difference between managing and governing. And then Shauna, our October board meeting is going to be intense all in caps. Ready to remind, reignite, and empower my board members with information and how we need the strengths and resources and energy that they bring to the organization. That's great. I've worked with organizations their board meetings, they actually set up the agenda based on their strategic planning initiatives. Mm-hmm. And so it keeps them thinking about how their strategic plan fits into what they're doing and how they're building on what they're doing as a board for the organization. Sharon, I serve on many boards. I've often heard things like, it's just an hour a month. We have to stop short selling the responsibilities. Mm-hmm. Agreed. Thumbs up on that. I see, that's great. Marquita, the merit of explaining board responsibilities. There we are, another shout out to that. And Alana, my engines are turning with my next board of directors training. So good, this is getting you thinking about how you can prep for that in different ways. Jamie, I'm wondering exactly how much influence does an ED or CEO have on how the organization operates and governs? Do you want to speak to that one?
I would say quite a bit of influence. You know, the executive director is hired to manage the nonprofit. And a part of managing the nonprofit is board development, board governance, and just kind of working with the board. And so I would say highly influenced in that regard.
That's great.
So
Yep, we're good. Go ahead.
All right. Thank you, Rebecca. So we're going to take a break and then we're going to come back and we're going to focus on program design, management, and evaluation. But before we take that break, two things. One is some of you may be a little bit old school like I am. All of my documentation is in a 3-ring binder notebook. So I have printed everything off and I have it in front of me as well as I can access it electronically. So if you are transitioning from face-to-face training experiences into this virtual world, if that is something that might help you, is to kind of have these items in hand, I would highly encourage you to do that. That may help, because we are going to be moving from PowerPoint to handouts to breakouts to, we're going to be doing a whole lot with this experience so that you get hands-on skill building, so that hands-on skill building takes place. So that's something to keep in mind. The next thing I need 3 volunteers before we go on break. And I'll give you just one little hint of what you're volunteering to do. One Well, one, you're going to have to use the annotate function of Zoom, and I'll just leave it at that. So if you're comfortable using the annotate function with Zoom, we'll coach you, but it's going to be on your feet coaching. So if we could get 3 people to volunteer so that my team knows who to make available when we return for the break. So I need 3, first come, first serve. If you could let us know in the chat who you are. 3 volunteers. Don't everybody speak
Not
up
all
at once.
All right, we've got Jonetta.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jonetta. And Letha. Thank you, Letha.
And I see Emma's hand.
Oh,
Oh,
good.
okay.
Perfect.
All right, so it is 11:28 by my clock. And so we're gonna come back at 11:40. That gives everybody a nice little break, maybe lunch, I don't know, but I'll see you on the other side.
All right, I will pause recording. We'll see you all in 10 minutes at 11:40. Thank you.
Right. Transition us back, or how do you?
Nope, I think we're all set. Didn't want to take away
We
from
can't hear you.
I can hear you. I can hear
Okay.
you. So.
All right, so
Okay.
we are moving on to our next topic, program design, management, and evaluation. And Rebecca, remind us of who our volunteers are that are going to help us out.
Yes, we have Jonetta, Letha, and Emma.
Okay, can you say that one more time? I'm sorry, that was.
No worries. It's Jonetta, Letha, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right, and then Emma.
Okay, great. All right. So we are going to move into our next topic, and it's going to require us to have all eyes on the screen because we're going to use the whiteboard feature, and we're also going to use the annotate function in order for us to kind of walk through what do we need to be mindful of when we're designing a program versus when we're managing a program versus when we are evaluating a program. And so if we could go to the whiteboard, and who's going to go first? Which of our volunteers wants to go first? Okay, have we identified? And then I'll give instructions.
First.
Janetta, you're first?
Yeah, I'll go first.
All right. Okay, great. So we want you to use the text box function. And if you would, just click on text.
Where?
It's at the top. You're going to go to the top of your screen, and where it says view options, at least that's where it is on mine. Where it says view options, you're going to do the drop down, and then it's going to say annotate, and you're going to click on annotate.
Okay, gotcha.
And then you're going to go to text. You see this bar that has all these different items on it. You're going to click on text.
Okay.
And then you're going to come down and you're going to create a text box for us. I don't. Okay.
So when you, after you've clicked on the text button, when you click down on the whiteboard, you should see a text box open up that you can type into. And it won't show us what you're typing in until you click outside of that box somewhere on the whiteboard.
Okay. And again, what am I typing into the text? I'm sorry. Into the box.
So you are typing in the word program design for me. The words program design. Great. Now I want you to create another text box, and I want you to share with us all the things that come to mind for you when you think about how to design a program. And if there's anybody in the class team, I'm adding something here. If there's anybody in the class that wants to shout out something, not in the chat box, you'll have to say it verbally so that Janetta can type. So you're in your text box, Janetta?
Yes, ma'am.
And so you can begin typing. What comes to mind for you when you think about program design? What should be included?
Audience.
Outcomes.
Evaluations.
Budget.
I'm sorry, how I go back?
Rebecca, you'll have to coach her because you can't go back and change the text box. You just click outside.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
That's
No,
okay.
you're fine.
Yeah,
You're
that's
fine.
fine. You can, there's also a clear function too at the top. It'll let you clear your last if you make a mistake. But it looks like maybe it clears everything, unfortunately.
Uh-huh.
As we're
That's
learning.
okay.
It looks like maybe an undo feature as well.
Mm-hmm.
That's the one I was looking for. So nice. So what were some of those that we had shouted out? We had audience. Evaluation was one of them.
Budget.
Budget, thank you, thank you.
Outcomes.
Outcomes.
Stakeholders.
Stakeholders, thank you, Beth.
Timeline.
Timeline.
Assessment.
Say that one again, I'm sorry.
Assessment.
Assessment, great.
Roles and
Janetta,
responsibilities.
Let us know if we're moving too fast, Janetta. And then was it? Okay, go ahead.
Oh.
Resources.
Wonderful. You're doing great, Janetta.
Absolutely, you
We're
are.
rooting for you. You're really on the spot here, but you're,
Yes, you are. Yep.
yeah.
Community need.
Thank you, Rose. Community need.
Accessibility.
Nice, Adriana. Thank you. Accessibility.
Janetta, thank you for being our first volunteer using the annotate function.
Roles and responsibilities.
Thanks,
So
Nova.
I think Rebecca, she can click and then we can see what she's typed so far in that.
Yeah, if you click outside of the text box, it should all appear there. There you go.
There we go. Yes, Janetta, way to go.
Is it
thank
relevant to
you.
mission?
I think Michael said relevant to mission, to the mission. Is that right, Michael?
Yes.
Okay.
I would add
Great.
theory of change.
Ah. Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah. Thank you, Val. Okay. Anybody want to have a last minute ad? We're going to save this and come back to it. But anybody with a last minute ad, and if we could save this, Leslie, I think it's Leslie that's on here.
Dr. Palmer, what about barriers?
Barriers, yes.
Mhm.
Janetta, barriers.
Nice, very good.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Janetta. Janetta gets a hand clap, I tell
Yeah.
you.
Thank
She
you.
gets a hand clap. Thank you. All right, can we save this?
Leslie, let me know if you're able to save
Mhm.
the whiteboard or if you need me to.
No, I saved it already.
Perfect.
Awesome. Thank you, Leslie.
Go ahead and clear. Okay. There you go.
So next is program management. Rebecca, can you type the program management phrase as far as the text box?
Yep.
And then who's our number 2 volunteer? All right,
I can go
Emma.
next. Oh.
Okay. Well, Emma, you are going to draw for us.
Ay, ay,
Uh, You're going to draw for us. Okay. So you are going to, Rebecca, I'm going to let you, I'm going to let you coach, Rebecca.
Okay, sorry.
You're good.
There, my drawing. There we go. I'm having trouble here.
You deleted your
I know I did.
program management.
Program management. So Dr. Palmer, you want her to use the draw function up at the top?
That's right. Yep. The squiggly, I think, is the one that's going to work best.
Yep. I'm going to move this here. There we go. Oops. Come on. There we go. Okay. And what did you want her to draw, Dr. Palmer?
So Emma, you are going to draw. What do we need to take into consideration when we manage a program? So when we manage a program,
we have to.
And we'll have to. Mm-hmm.
You want me to answer?
Go ahead.
Yes.
Well, we have to manage, first of all, the rules that we have that we follow up in the budget that we have.
Okay. So can you draw some numbers for me for budget?
Oh my God, like, how do I do that?
So at the top of your screen, you'll see the drop down, you'll say view options.
Okay.
And you'll click down under annotate. Do you see annotate there?
Let's see. Oh no, hold on, let me see. View auction. Oh my God, at the top of my screen?
Yep, at the top of your Zoom screen, you'll see, it'll say view options. It's a drop down.
I'm looking for it. Go slow. Raise the hand.
I think maybe you're in your
Okay.
one section.
So Rebecca, I'm going to ask you to just help out just
I
real
did, I
quick, then
see
we're
it.
going to come
I
back
see
to
it now.
Emma. You see, you
I
got
see
it? Okay. All right.
Great.
So
Okay,
which one do I use?
So you'll, do you see one that looks like a squiggly line? It says draw.
Yeah.
Under when you click on the annotate.
Yes.
Okay, you'll click on that, and then since you were discussing the budget, you could go ahead and you could draw a $sign. You could draw a couple of numbers. But you'd go ahead and take your mouse is now your drawing implement. So you click on it. For instance, I can draw. Oops, let me go to the draw function. We've got a couple of different line options. Maybe I do the thick one to draw a little $sign like that. Can you see that?
Yeah, I see it now.
Okay. So your draw option will give you a chance to use your mouse as almost like a marker or a pencil or pen. Okay. What else under program management? Folks in the audience, you can shout out some ideas around program management or even put them in the chat and we can call them out. It may be easier to do them in the chat because we can give Emma some time to figure out a drawing for each of these.
I will put up what type of signal for drawing, like budget?
Yeah.
Like a budget?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So I put the $sign in there. Can you all see that?
Yeah.
Okay. So another aspect of program management that's come through from Marquita is feedback.
Okay.
And you can use your mouse to draw a representation of that or type it in if you're more comfortable with that too. That's
okay.
great. Yep.
Which one? Board training?
Yep, board training. got supervision.
So I had to draw board training.
Some of these, if you find that it's too hard to draw, we can just type them in with text too. But if there's anything of these that you would like to draw, feel free to get creative.
Staff.
I'll get in here and draw. I'll help you out a little bit, Emma. I'll draw. Oh, let's see. This is going to be a person.
I'm trying to look for a person.
So this is the profile of someone who is giving feedback.
So-
That is a terrible drawing.
Yeah, and we've got feedback, outcomes, budget, staff, board training, supervision, evaluation. So quite a bit involved when it comes to program management. I think Emma gets a hand clap, a pat on the
I'm
back,
sorry.
a thank you for No. You've done great. You've done absolutely great. The next topic for us is program evaluation. Who's our next volunteer?
And Leslie is going to go and save
Oh,
this.
save that, Leslie. Yep.
It's me.
Okay.
Oh, nice.
And so what we want this time is symbols. Rebecca, I'll let you tell me who our third person is.
It's Letha.
Letha. All
Yes.
right. Okay. You're Rebecca.
Letha, you can use either the text version if you'd like. You could draw symbols if you'd like. The other option is the stamp function that has an arrow, a check, an X, a star, a heart, question mark. You can use any of those to sort of map out anything around program evaluation. And part of the reason why we're doing this is getting you all comfortable with using this feature and this function, and getting to know how to use it and how it looks.
Okay. So first, stamp comes to mind immediately, right? Because it's like you're checking off
All right.
as you evaluate.
Yeah, nice. I like that.
Nice.
That's great.
And
We
then
have. Go
I'm
ahead.
using the heart to represent positive feedback on a program evaluation, something we loved about the program.
Nice. Yeah, you could also do the same with stars, right? How many stars would you give this program? How many stars would you give
That's
our
right.
organization, right? Very nice.
Yep.
We've got good survey, reporting, evaluations, daily, oh, sorry, that's from a different section. Yep, survey of program participants.
I'm using the X to represent maybe something that we realize we don't want to do anymore. So we're going to cut that out or X that out.
Exactly. Very nice. And some of these words that are coming in are getting added in as text. That's great. Ah, we got from Kenan, SMART. We all know. Does that stand for something?
So we've got reporting, we've got cost, we've got surveys. I see testing and test in the chat. We've got implement feedback. We've got check marks and question marks. And so program evaluation is a significant part of the work that we do. And if you're writing grants or you're having to give feedback or show impact, you might have to demonstrate return on the investment of your donors or your funders. So all of these are essential and very important. I am going to have Leslie put in the chat a link to a document that gives you a list of characteristics of each of these parts of program design, program management, and program evaluation. Leslie is going to put in the chat a document that has a list of program design, management, and evaluation characteristics. She's going to put that in the chat for you. And we're going to stay with the white screen, but can we just do a gallery view? We're going to stay with the white screen. We're going to save this screen. And, but if we could do gallery view, great, thank you. So you should have in the chat, you should have a link to a document that has 17 items listed, and they're divided by program design, management, and evaluation. So we're gonna do a quick pop quiz, and we're gonna go back to the first picture on the whiteboard, and we're gonna see how many of the characteristics of design match what we put up on the whiteboard. Make sense? We all good? So I'm gonna have, it looks like everybody has the link, everybody has the document. And so Leslie, if you could take us to the program.
If you bear with us for a moment, I think Dr. Palmer had some technical difficulties for just one moment. Everyone go ahead and open that document, and we've got program design here from our first whiteboard.
Okay, so everybody has the doc and opened up. So let's compare and contrast. So what we have shared with you in our document is a list of characteristics. And so I'm gonna walk us through these, but we are going, Leslie. Okay, so the very first, we've got 8 characteristics listed with the, on this list. We've got problem, and we've got target population. We've got, which is demographics, psychographics. We've got needs assessment. We've got asset mapping. We've got program landscape in terms of similar programs and services, feedback from program participants in terms of what the needs are, how this type of program and how affordable is this type of program. Feedback from community partners with the same questions, and then fund development strategies. So for this particular program, are we going to do fundraising? Are we going to earn income? Are we going to write grants, or are we going to have fee for services? So program design is kind of what we have listed. Is there any item listed under program design that you'd like for me to elaborate on? And you can put that in the chat. Or asset mapping. Asset mapping is when we're designing a program and we want to identify if there are any supportive resources that would help a person that might be receiving those services or receiving those or engaged in that program. Are there any other assets or any other resources that we can couple with that to help that person? So let's say the program is a food pantry. Well, maybe that person might also need housing. So we're going to do some asset mapping around that program. Does that help? Okay. Can we go back to the whiteboard? So let's go to program management, the whiteboard for that. And we're going to do the same. We're going to look to see what we came up with, and then how does that align with what we are learning about in terms of what to take into consideration when you're managing a program. So our image tells us money, supervision, feedback, outcomes, budget, staff, board training. The list that we have for you is volunteers. So that's knowledge, skills, and experience. In terms of getting the word out, so communication, to promote, advertise, and market the program. There's a need for that. We may do special events. We may go resource fairs. We might do raise the awareness events to help people to learn a little bit more about what this program is all about. And there it is again, fund development strategies. So are we going to write grants for this program? Are we going to charge a fee for this? To generate any kind of earned dollars for this program. Program evaluation is next. So we're going to go to the whiteboard with program evaluation. And we're going to spend a little bit more
Okay, so sorry about the inconvenience that you all are experiencing with the Dr. Palmer's audio. What we're going to do is going to get her connected via phone.
Here
if you can
we
just
go. I'm back,
Okay,
Salima.
all right. So
I'm not sure what's happening. My apologies.
Okay, sorry about that. We are back on.
Okay. So the next thing we're going to do is the program evaluation. Again, for program evaluation and for the I'm getting advice here. I'm going to take you.
Thanks for bearing with us, everyone.
To evaluate.
So,
focus.
Yep.
Uh-huh.
Dr. Palmer, we'll try this and see if hiding your video will help with sound quality. If not, we may need you to call in and join by phone.
Will do.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Do you want me to just continue? Do you want me to continue talking, Rebecca?
I think so, yeah. It still sounds like it may be going in and out, so I'll let you know.
Okay. Do we want to take like a real quick little 30-second and I sign off and maybe sign back in?
It sounds good right now, so let's go with it. Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay. All right. All right. So in terms of evaluation, we've got process, preparing to evaluate, focusing the evaluation, conducting the evaluation, and reporting the results. But to be more specific, there are some prep questions that are really helpful when you're trying to determine how to evaluate your program. And there are some specific ways in which we can focus in evaluation, as well as how to collect the data, how to analyze the data, and how to interpret the data. And then the final part of the process is reporting, okay? So if we could go to the list, Leslie, of the 17. How was the technology? Is that better?
Yep, it sounds much better. Yep.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you all. So in your packet, in your handout packet, I'm going to walk us through what you have. You know, Leslie, let's go to the handouts for evaluation. Okay. So in your packet, the first thing you have is a definition of. I put it on this day because
Dr. Palmer, I think we're having some more trouble with sound.
and
Yeah, it sounds like we're still having difficulty. Go ahead and, like you
Okay.
said, let's maybe take a 30-second break and have you call in.
Yep.
And then I'll
Okay.
admit you and we'll continue. Thanks for your patience, everyone. Dr. Palmer will join us.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Okay, Dr. Palmer is hopefully dialing in right now. Thanks, Michael. Avoiding awkward silences. If everyone can see his comment in the chat. So a horse walks into a bar. Bartender looks at him and says, "Why the long face?" Nice. Okay. This should be Dr. Palmer. Thanks, Michael. All right, Dr. Palmer, can you hear us?
Am I
by
by
phone
phone or
am
am
I
I by?
So let's see. I think we need to, let me go ahead and mute.
How is this now?
That's better.
Okay, good.
That's
Okay,
better.
I'm
Well
good.
done.
Are we all?
Okay.
Thank you all. Sorry about that.
No worries.
So we are going through your packet with your program evaluation information. And so as we are kind of walking through the different parts of the evaluation process, what I've found over the years is that this is one of the areas where nonprofits are challenged to some degree. We spend a lot of time on the design and the management of the program, and sometimes not on purpose, of course, but we sometimes miss the opportunity to really flesh out the evaluation part of programs. So you've got a definition there, but if you go to the next page in your packet, the preparing to evaluate, focusing the evaluation, and conducting the evaluation, and then reporting the results and findings. So if you keep in mind the 17 different areas of a program, when we are focusing the evaluation, oftentimes we're going back to see if the design is working for us, or trying to determine that. Is the way we're managing the program, is that working? And or are there any of those characteristics that we need to change? So the next item you have in your packet is prep questions. So these are questions that you can ask or answer, I should say, whereby you are kind of beginning to get a sense of how should we focus this evaluation? How should we engage in evaluating the program? The next information you have is the focusing the evaluation. It's like a matrix is the way we have it set up, and it's a worksheet. And so we can identify our program, note why we are conducting the evaluation, what we are specifically evaluating, who's going to use the information once we have it, when should the evaluation be completed, and how will we actually go about making the evaluation happen. So what tools will we use to do that? And then the next handout goes along with this one in terms of focusing. What we're doing here is we're giving you more specifics. So in terms of why are we conducting the evaluation, it may be to improve the program. It may be to help other people understand the program and its results. It may be to determine if the program is worth the cost. We had ROI on our evaluation whiteboard a few minutes ago. And then what are we evaluating exactly? Are we evaluating impact? Are we evaluating whether or not we've achieved the goals of the program? And then who will use the information once we have it? So this is helping us to kind of bring some focus to the evaluation that we use for this program. Now, for conducting the evaluation, this is, we take a look at the types of evaluation that are available to us in terms of not conducting, but focusing the evaluation. So is it a goals-based evaluation? Will it be a process-oriented evaluation, or will it be a outcomes-based evaluation? So the sheet before this, the handout before this, gives you kind of a big picture view of the types. And then these are specific questions that we can ask related to evaluating the program based on the focus that you want to use for your program evaluation. And then we get into actually conducting the evaluation, collecting the data. This is one of my favorite handouts because it gives us methods that we can use to collect data, and then it tells us the purpose for that method and how that method will help us talk about our program from an evaluation perspective. So I'm going to stop on this handout to see if you have questions about this one. Okay. Another aspect of this is the analysis of the data. So it's great that we can do focus groups and interviews and supervise people and all of that. Well, when we get that information back, how do you analyze it? A general way that we categorize data is whether it's qualitative or quantitative data. And so we can use different methods to get different types of data. And so what we have here is just a quick reference so that you can identify how a particular type of data should be analyzed. Questions on this particular worksheet?
If you have questions, you can certainly put them in the chat and I'll be happy to read them out, or you can also unmute yourself and ask directly, whatever you're comfortable with.
I have
so the next,
Sorry, this is Shauna. I have a quick question about collecting the data. I struggle with understanding the difference between an evaluation form and a reflection form, and how, is it possible to combine the two? And is there like a breaking point between, exhausting the participants who are going to be giving that information, where like too many questions is too much, or do you have like a number like strongly agree, strongly disagree? What's the best way for obtaining information that will be helpful without exhausting the people who are giving you the information?
Good question. What I'll say to the evaluation, you said form versus reflection form. Reflection is a method. That is a method for acquiring information. So you could outright ask me 10 questions and I give you yes, no, or you could say, Dr. Palmer, tell me what you think about, or how did this impact you, in more of a reflective way where you're getting kind of my general thoughts without framing it with questions. So you're just allowing me to reflect. So reflection is an evaluative tool. That is a tool that we use in some cases. And yes, you can exhaust your participants. So you do want to be mindful of how often you're asking them to give you feedback. And you want to make sure that each way that you ask is unique and different. So you don't want to give me 3 surveys in a year. Well, let me rephrase. You don't necessarily want to repeat the same task, have your participants repeat the same data collection task where you're asking for the same information over and over and over again, because you have it. So you want to make sure that the items that are referenced in your tool or in your methodology, you want to make sure that it's unique and different. And it also depends on what it is you're looking for. I see Kenan in the chat that's saying depends on the measures and metrics you have as a part of your design. That's exactly right. So if you go back to where we were talking about focusing the evaluation, what is the purpose? What is it that you're trying to find out? What do you want to know? And that's going to directly impact how often you ask participants and how you ask participants. Now, one thing with government programming, oftentimes it's repetitive, and you might have to explain to your participants, this part of the program is directly required by the funder or by the source that the resources are coming from. Most participants understand that their feedback is needed, but you have to start sharing that with them when they come into the program. So you don't want to kind of hit them with all these questions and, and all this feedback. You want to prep them for it. Does that help, Shauna?
It does, Dr. Palmer. Thank you.
You're welcome. Am I missing anything in the chat?
Nope. I think we're
Okay.
good. Yeah. Thanks.
Okay. So once we get past the data analysis, we have to interpret it. You know, we've got to share what it means. And you go back to the focus. If it was a goal-based evaluation versus a process-based evaluation, as opposed to an outcomes-based evaluation, then the information and how you interpret it is going to be different. Now, we do know quite often we use more of an eclectic approach to interpreting data. So it could be a combination of these three. It doesn't necessarily have to be one or the other. But one thing you want to keep in mind is that it goes back to the focus. So that's fundamental to identify where you want to start there. And then the last part of this is reporting the results and the findings. So oftentimes it's in a written report form. And so we've got an outline here for that. Leslie, if you could go to the page before. Great. So we've got a, sometimes it's written in a report form, and you'll see a reflection of what we talked about in the different phases of the evaluation process here. And then the last page has a list of potential stakeholders that the evaluation report may have to, may go to. So program evaluation. So we've done program design, management, and eval. And Leslie, if you could take us back to the list of 17 items. So today we've covered board governance, program design, management, and evaluation. Any last questions about program design, management, and evaluation? And I'm going to pick up here in the next session since I had a little bit of technical difficulty there. I'm going to pick up with program design, management, and evaluation when we return next week, just because I don't want us to go through this too swiftly. I want to make sure that I can answer questions. And then I also want to include just a little bit of practice with that focusing the evaluation worksheet. But any general questions about, or comments even, about this particular principle of the North Carolina Center for Nonprofits?
There was a question from Mary just regarding the handouts, the one that we were just looking at, I believe, on evaluation, and whether or not all of those handouts that we were just looking at are included in that handouts folder.
Yes, it should be. Yep.
Okay. I thought so too. When I just scanned over them, I think we have all the ones that were relevant there for you.
Yeah, all of those are there. Yeah. Now, what you don't have, was it Mary, Rebecca? They had the question. What you don't have is you don't have what's on the screen right now. That was in a link.
Right.
That came in a link.
And all of those that you shared as links, I've downloaded and we can include in the wraparound.
Okay.
Or follow-up. A comment from Rose and agreement from Janetta. Going back, would love more resources and tips on board recruitment, or possibly covered in the next segment or session.
Okay.
And from Katina, would also be interested in ED's role, if any, in board recruitment.
Okay. So if we could just make a note that when we start next Tuesday, I will respond to these questions, and then we will also do a little bit of work with that, focusing the evaluation worksheet.
Great. Great. Any other questions or comments? Thanks, Janetta and Kenan. Next week's session will be on strategic planning.
And I also want to give a reminder to all participants. Thank you, Dr. Palmer and Rebecca and Leslie as well. please be sure to check your emails this Friday for the handouts for the subsequent week, as well as the handouts that were discussed during today's session. It will be sent via the extranet link that was distributed in the chat box today. And also just be sure to check your spam or junk folders. Sometimes they have a tendency to go there. As well as any items, any key resources that were shared via the chat box that's also shared in our handouts that were featured from session 2. We appreciate all of your participation and your time. We encourage you, if you are just joining us for the first time today, that if you haven't already completed that SurveyMonkey assessment, please do so that your findings could be emailed to you individually, so we can have that as a part of our overall summary, as well as your individual findings for things that you would like to work towards over the next year. Through this institute, as well as other services that the Center for Nonprofits offers. Any other announcements, Leslie, Rebecca, Dr. Palmer, that we'd like to share?
My only
Go ahead.
I was just going to say my only comment is as we move forward in the workshop experience, please have tools available like highlighters, pencils, Post-it notes, pieces of paper. Oftentimes when I'm facilitating, just based on kind of the way the questions come forth and what we're working on or what comes up, I may engage us in some unique ways. So just kind of as a FYI, and I don't want that to throw people off, but we are in a classroom, my opinion. We are in a classroom, and so we are going to try to be as helpful to you as possible while we have this space or sharing this space together. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you so much again, Dr. Palmer. I hope everyone has a great remainder to your Tuesday. We'll see you back here next week. If you have any further questions between now and then, please don't hesitate to reach out to me and my team. We'll be happy to answer any of the inquiries that you have. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, everybody.